Today, we're looking at a blue ink by Sailor, Night Blue. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, there's timestamps down below so that if you're only interested in certain parts, you can skip around. But if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. You can also follow me over on Instagram. And if you're new here and like fountain pen ink reviews, I would invite you to subscribe. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Parker jotter with a medium nib. I wrote with it for a day and used it to take the notes for this video. In order to have some standardization in my writing samples, I always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, so it came in a vial like this. And to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. Now the extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer some nice shading spots, some spots that show up a little bit darker than what's around it, like the X in Fox, the BR in brown. It's there, it's not huge. 10 seconds to dry. Medium is slightly, just a tone darker than the extra fine, but nowhere near as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and it still has little bits of that shading, like the BRO is a little bit darker than the WN. The A is slightly lighter than the L or the Z, 16 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both don't really show color variation, although we get spots of it in the writing. Tomoe River. No bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. Yeah, maybe just a little bit less than normal. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 20 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine, just a little bit, nowhere near as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 27 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation, and we didn't get it. And Rhodia. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. Extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, and 12 seconds to dry. Medium is a tad darker than the extra fine, nowhere near as dark as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 16 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both actually do show a tiny bit of color variation left to right, although we're not getting it in the writing. I agree with Vita that we can learn a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we do see that it's immediately wanting to start to bond on the very bottom, but it is able to push up when it's immediately wet on the paper. Now the one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes. And in only 10 minutes, it completely bonded with the paper and didn't want to budge, showing it's going to be a fairly permanent ink. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, this is a great ink to use in a note-taking situation if you want to be able to go back and highlight. And that shows in the water. The water had very little effect moving this ink off the page. Pen flush started to break up only the top very little bit of that ink, but most of it's really there. The 1/3 bleach solution also only started to really remove the tiniest bit, but not very much. Now I only needed water to get this out of my pen. Despite its bonding with the paper, it doesn't do that to the plastic parts in the pen. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with a realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Now I'm going to link the video that shows how I do my testing and calculations. Sailor's Night Blue has a viscosity of 1.38, making this a very wet ink. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with a realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. I find this by using my writing samples that were done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. Sailor's Night Blue has an average dry time of 17 seconds, so despite it being very wet, its dry time is not just normal, but average. Instead of finding inks that look like Sailor's Night Blue, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I wanted to go with a nice brown and chose Krishna's Ochre. The second writing sample is done on yellow Rhodia, Life, and Franklin Christoph paper. Looking at the yellow Rhodia paper, not to see any kind of performance change that would happen, but more to see any kind of tone change that can happen to this ink from the blue for having a yellow backdrop. And we do see that that blue turns a slightest bit towards turquoise. Now, I don't think that would hurt you in a professional environment. I don't think anybody would jump all over it. It doesn't so much happen in the stub. It definitely gets darker there. Just something to be aware of for your professional environments if you use yellow paper. Life paper. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 10 seconds to dry. Medium is a little bit darker than the extra fine, not as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, spots of shading. Like quick starts darker, gets lighter, gets dark. Brown starts darker, gets lighter, gets to a mid-tone on the end. So it is there a little bit in the medium, 16 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine shows no color variation. We didn't get it. The medium shows some, and we got some. Franklin Christoph. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 6 seconds to dry. Medium is quite a bit darker than the extra fine, nowhere near as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 8 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both show us no color variation, and we didn't get any in the writing, and that is all that I have for the writing sample. So what do I think of Sailor Night Blue? There's not a lot of shading to be had in the writing, but the tone is pleasant enough that it doesn't need shading to come out to really show how nice it is. Now, it does come across as a very standard blue with that. You could probably get lost in the office with this blue. So what nib and pen are going to give the best writing experience with this ink? Its tone that it gives can vary depending on the wetness of the pen, from lighter to darker, obviously drier to wetter. I would prefer this one as a lighter ink from a drier medium pen. I find that to be the best version of this blue for me. If you've made it this far and you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I'm going to remind you to subscribe. Thanks for watching.